If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we're back. Good evening, everyone. I am John Wheaton, founder of the Righteous Savages and co-host here on Survival Dispatch. Tonight, we're bringing you an important topic that really should impact everyone, and that is travel preparedness with your family. And we'll probably talk about some of the differences between traveling with your family, traveling solo, and traveling with other people, whether they be trained or not. So we're going to get into this, and full disclosure, we did put out a video several weeks ago when I was actually on vacation, and I made a critical mistake that caused us to get in trouble with YouTube, and that was to show weapons, even though I was just giving you guys examples of what I typically would carry with me. That is against the rules on the new communist YouTube, unfortunately. So tonight we are going to do this without any kind of issues. I'm not going to show you guys any weapons or anything. We're just going to generally talk about the preparedness that we need. And I may show you guys some websites and things like that, but it will be in the context of just showing you guys links and things that you can go look at. So let's get to it. But before we do, let's start with the conflicted question, as we always do. And tonight is an interesting one. The banking system collapsed, and although you have some supplies, if you had access to your bank account, you could always get more. There are, however, people who owe you money, and it dawns on you that either you need to collect now in cash or goods or risk never getting paid. How would you go about collecting debts after the collapse? I think this opens up some rabbit holes we could go down. You guys think about that, and we'll return to it at the end of the episode. And real quick, while you guys are looking at our content, if you're new, why don't you guys go over and sign up for a free account on our Substack? That will give you access to the Saturday Watch Guide and a list of everything that we publish for the week, including thumbnails, links, and descriptions. It's your one-stop shop to see all of the stuff that we are putting out on a regular basis here on Survival Dispatch, and it's a lot. We have short form and long form survival videos by a lot of our content creators, as well as our live streams every night except for Saturday. And that gives you guys a wealth of knowledge when it comes to urban preparedness, the political landscape, and natural disasters, and possibly man-made natural disasters. But that's all available if you just go sign up for a free Substack account, and it'll give you all of that information. Without further ado, we're not going to do the overall terror threat assessment tonight, and we're just going to devote this entire hour or maybe a little bit more to what is a very important topic for anybody that travels. Whether you're a business person that travels or you're going on vacation with your family, as conservatives, Christians, and people who are aware of the real threats that are out there in the world, we need to understand safety, and that we can't always rely, in fact, we can very rarely rely on the government, even when the government is technically on our side as far as the political view. So we have to be prepared for everything, and that includes potential terrorist attacks, civil unrest, and just general natural disasters. What happens when we are hundreds of miles away from our home and a massive flood comes through, or an earthquake, or some sort of issue that keeps us from getting home easily. So tonight we're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss talking about this with your family, how you guys get prepared for traveling, and what are some of the things and the layers that we're going to put around us when it comes to these travel setups. I'll be sharing with you guys some of my own knowledge from recent trips that I have taken with my family and without, and how that looks different, and whether what mode of transportation you're using, as well as everything else in between. I'll talk to you guys about how to pack specific items, how to organize them in your vehicle, and how your vehicle really can be your home away from home when it comes to survival and preparedness. Let's get to it. This is important, and it's a foundational skill, and this is a skill. It is not something that you just learn by watching a video. Once we are done with this, I want you guys to start to take assessments and look at your own personal setup and how it may differ from mine. Some of you may not have small children, and it may be just you and your spouse traveling. That's a different setup. So you have to take all of these things into consideration. If there's one thing I want you guys to take away from this, it is the fact that I want you guys to think about this in the context of your own application. So let's get going. Travel preparedness isn't just a convenience. It's a critical skill that in today's world we need to understand. Self-reliance is the utmost and the most important. So what does that look like? The foundation of travel preparedness really starts with research and planning. Where are you going? What are you doing? And what is your backup, your secondary plan, your tertiary plan? All of those things matter, and we need to think about them. When we go into a place that we're not aware or that we haven't been before, we're not really familiar with. I could tell you how to get home 9 different ways in the region that I live in, but I couldn't tell you that, say, over in Indiana, just a couple of hours away, or a couple of hours the other way over in Missouri, even an hour down south when I get into Kentucky. Completely different landscapes, completely different setups. So let's talk about foundations of what we need. So this means understanding political climates. Are you going to a state, say you're taking a trip to California? I love California. I think it's one of the most beautiful states in the country. I would not want to travel there, specifically because of political climate and crime statistics. And you guys may say even the same thing about the state that I live in, Illinois. And I would agree with you if you're talking about northern Illinois, up by the communist haven of Chicago. But down in the South, we don't deal with the same kind of criminal activity that they do up there. Also, what are you close to that could cause a natural disaster? If you're in Oklahoma in the height of tornado season, that would be something that you guys would want to think about. What does the research tell you about the time of year and what kinds of natural disasters you guys need to plan for? So, what does this look like in practicality? Let's start with just the planning aspect. Before you even pack a bag, load a magazine with a round, or talk to your family about a trip, when you are planning something, you need to do your research. We need to look at routes and how we're going to map out those routes. So you can use this. There are online resources that you can find multiple different ways to get to places, and looking at that, plan out primary routes, a secondary route, and maybe even a tertiary route on how to get to main roads or to avoid main roads. We need to know how to do both. And I know this is a lot. It's very, very important that we understand these things. We need to identify safe zones. We need to know where trusted medical facilities, tier 1 trauma centers, all of these things. Understand local laws. If you're a concealed carry owner, I would highly recommend that you guys go get an app called CCW. And that app, I think it's like $2.99. It's a lifetime download. And it essentially tells you, you put in your state, and then you put in all of the states that you may be going through, traveling through, and it will tell you if you have this concealed carry license, it applies in these particular states, but here's what you need to understand. States like South Carolina would be a perfect example. They have a South Carolina resident and a South Carolina non-resident concealed carry law. Those laws differ. And there are a lot of states like that. Virginia, I think, is another one like that, where if you're a citizen, you have a lot more freedom of movement and you don't run as many risks. Now, this is not me telling you to not conceal carry in a state even that tells you you can't conceal carry in it, because I think the Second Amendment overrules all of that. But if we want to avoid any kinds of issues, we want to make sure that we are compliant if we were to run into a law enforcement agent. At the end of the day, that's your decision to make, and I make those decisions based off of my understanding and my history of seeing what has happened and taking advice from people that have been in a lot worse situations than I have ever been faced with. So this is an important one, and probably the most important one is that we can defend ourselves. Now, let's talk about how we are going to what aspects of this planning we need to actually take into consideration. So one is, where are we going? The route that we're going to get there. How are we going to be staying if we're staying overnight? If it's a day trip, that's one thing. You probably pack a lot less. We always need to make sure that we have the ability to get home, even if it's on foot, even if you're a couple hundred miles away from home. Now, that will take you a long time on foot. We don't want to abandon our vehicles unless it's absolutely necessary, but we also want to make sure that we're keeping the things that we need for survival of us and the people we're traveling with if we needed to actually walk home. So that's all stuff to consider. But if you're staying overnight, what do? Are you staying in a hotel? Are you staying in an Airbnb? I personally have come to love Airbnbs a lot more because you get a personalized touch. You can actually see the ratings of people as a host and see what their guests have said about them. I know we've all seen the horror stories. That's a very minimal level, and take this from somebody who is actually considering turning in a rental property into an Airbnb very soon. I don't think most of you guys would have a problem renting an Airbnb from me, because you guys know where I stand on my ideology and my mindset and my worldview. And you can actually get a lot of information on the hosts of the places that you're looking to stay. What an Airbnb gives you is a lot more flexibility than a hotel. Hotels offer a lot more, shall we say, barriers to being able to freely move in and out, bring in items that some hotels may frown upon, say firearms and self-defense things. That's always important. Now, one of the things that I would say is we have to consider the fact that there are some creepy people out there, and they're very good at hiding themselves. So having a tool to be able to check for, say, hidden cameras, and there are some very inexpensive tools on the internet that you can get that will actually detect radio frequencies and cameras so that you can actually do scans of vital areas within the Airbnbs. And that is an important thing. We've all heard the stories of people finding hidden cameras, all of those kinds of things. But in reality, the same thing can be said for hotels. In fact, there's a lot more over time evidence of people doing this stuff in hotel rooms because they're creepy and they want to watch people, whatever, get undressed, do whatever. And that's a real thing that you guys can consider. So I would actually look at a cheap tool. You can find them on Amazon. It's called a camera detector. Some of them have really good reviews, some of them don't, but they have the ability to detect cameras, and you can go anywhere from $50 up to about $150 to $180 on Amazon. And some of these have thousands of ratings. You can find bugs and listening devices, as well as cameras. And these things have been around for a very long time. They're very simple, so it's not some kind of super complicated thing. It has a bar that shows you when you're detecting something, much like a metal detector, and it can give you a little bit of peace of mind, especially in places like bedrooms and bathrooms and those kinds of things. Communication is equally a vital part of this. But before I get to that, let's actually talk about the tier levels of which I would consider if I'm talking about defensive tools. So, one, a good concealed carry pistol. One of the things that I have found as an instructor over the last several years is that people always judge concealed carry by the size of the weapon. And the smaller they think is better. That's not necessarily true. In fact, in my experience, especially even with female shooters, what I find is that people always underestimate the size of gun that they actually need. This is why the Glock 19 and that size of gun is probably the most popular, and probably what I would suggest most people start with. Because if you get into the small little subcompacts, the Ruger LC9s, all of those little small, they're so snappy. I am a large frame individual. I'm a very strong person. I lift weights all of the time. I have very strong hands, and I hate firing a subcompact firearm. They're so snappy, they're never comfortable to shoot. And if it's not comfortable to shoot, if it's not something that you can adjust to, then you're not going to want to train with it. So I would generally say get the largest framed handgun for concealed carry that you can comfortably use. Okay. And that's important for a lot of reasons. Training is one, and people underestimate what the public does as far as observation of people carrying firearms. In all honesty, in most cases, I could probably walk around with a gun sticking out of my pocket and clear view, and most people would not notice it. And this is probably one of your biggest things, is because you're going to have a concealed carry weapon on you. By its very nature, it is meant to be on your person. So taking that into considerations is the first big step in this layers that we're talking about. Inside of your vehicle, however, I would have a bigger stash of weapons and defensive tools. I would carry some sort of defensive blade on me, maybe a small 2 or 3 inch blade, fixed blade, or something that's easy to deploy that you can keep in your pocket. But there's a lot of really great options. The sock P dagger is a great fixed blade that you can put inside of your belt line. It's very easy to retrieve as far as having a ring hole that you can grab and grab a hold of it. And it is a great stabbing tool for defensive purposes. Then you might want something a little bit larger in your car. Now let's talk about the car stash, or what you're going to basically be fighting to. If you were faced with a scenario where you had some sort of terrorist attack or a multiple shooter type situation, and you needed to be able to retrieve bigger firepower, some of the stuff we've talked about on Survival Dispatch recently with Khalid Muhammad and Mike Glover, talking about scenarios where we're looking at multiple shooters coordinated and trained, and you're not going to see the police show up because of everything that's going on. Something like that happens, you need to be able to fight to your vehicle and then retrieve a larger stash of firearms. Maybe you have a full-size, full-frame handgun there, and I would highly suggest that in some sort of quick deployable belt system or Brocos belt kind of thing that can go right over your clothing. You can snap it together, have multiple magazines for both your rifle and pistol. Unfortunately, probably 10 years ago, I wouldn't have necessarily been advising people to put an AR in their vehicle, because it wasn't really practical necessarily, unless you were traveling way far away. You're going to be out in the middle of nowhere. You might need to be able to defend yourself against animals, that kind of thing. But generally, we were talking about, maybe you have some more ammo in your vehicle and you retrieve that or something along those lines. But the landscape of the world has changed. And now we're looking at possibly having multiple shooters in a coordinated attack on something. And if you're in the middle of that, you need to have weapons that are effective against what they're carrying. And most likely they're going to be carrying some kind of carbine, rifle caliber carbine that's going to be very effective at multiple hundreds of yards. We need to be able to fight back. And the effectiveness difference between even a very high dollar, highly, engineered type handgun versus just your average stock $500 rifle, AR-15, is insane. You will lose that fight 99.9% of the times, and the times that you wouldn't is because you just got lucky. These are very effective weapons, and they're much more effective than a handgun. And so this is why you're seeing police starting to deploy more of these types of weapons. And I think as things continue to escalate, you'll see more and more of that. So I would, at minimum, have 5 magazines and a carbine, rifle caliber carbine in your car with 5 loaded magazines. Maybe 2 in a belt line. Maybe you have a chest rig with all of your stuff that you can just throw over your shoulders. There's some great ones out there. Onward Research, Haley Strategic, Mountain Partisan, and Spirit Systems. They all make amazing, some modular, so you can really make it custom, some not as modular, but still solid as a rock. And I would check out any of those companies, and they're all make fantastic stuff. Prior military guys that have actually tested equipment, and they're very big into the purpose of this equipment. So if you want to get a chest rig, that's what I would suggest. Belts, same companies. They all make really good quality stuff. And, do you need body armor? I mean, you can, but keep in mind, every one of these items is going to add more in your luggage area. And it's going to be more stuff that you probably need to not let people walk by and just look into your vehicle and see. So concealment's going to be another big thing that you're going to have to do. Some vehicles, like minivans, have these compartments underneath the seats that allow you to store them very easily, and there's these little compartments underneath. I know Honda is very big on this, Toyota as well. So if you have a minivan, there's actually a lot of really good concealment options. The one thing that you have to consider, though, is that there is a balancing act between storing it in your vehicle and concealing it versus quick deployment. So those are things that you have to take into consideration. Do you want to put all of your luggage on top of these things that you may need quickly and vitally? So this is all things that you need to think about. And there are some other companies. Savior Equipment is another great one that makes bags that look very inconspicuous, and you can store these kinds of things in. Vertex is another great one. They're very big on the gray man theory. So a lot of their bags look like just everyday Walmart bags. And most people aren't going to walk by and see, oh, that's a Vertex bag. A lot of them have started making bags that don't even have their name on them, where it's very easy to see. And typically, like, the tags are inside of the bags. So all important stuff and all things that you need to think about. So staging, I would have it to where it's inconspicuous but easily accessible. And that may take you planning some different things. Maybe you need to get one of the rack compartments to put all of your luggage in so that you can actually have easy access to your weapons and your defensive mechanisms. So this is all stuff that we have to consider. And I know this is a lot, but it's really important that we understand these kinds of things. The other thing, and the last thing that I'm going to talk about with defensive tools, is the fact that you need to train. And it's more important now than ever that you guys find a reputable training company that can train you guys, that has years of experience. And I will shameless plug Righteous Savages, Tombstone Gun Range. We have a lot of training in the Midwest that we do. And we're just a couple of hours from multiple large cities. Evansville, Indiana, and probably more tier 2 cities. St. Louis, Missouri. We're 4 hours away from Chicago. We're very close to Kentucky. And so you're right in the heart of the Midwest. And if you're driving 5 hours, you can get to us fairly easily. And that covers a large part of the Midwest. But we have a lot of training classes coming up, and we're going to be branching out even past the firearms world into some medical stuff and just general preparedness. There's a lot of curriculum that we're developing to give you guys a heads up on that and really hands-on type experience, because you're not going to learn this, and I can't stress this enough, you're not going to learn these skills without actually doing some sort of hands-on training. Look at your local fire departments, police departments, and see if they offer any kind of stop the bleed type thing for everyday people. Some do, and some of them will give you some really good tips on using medical aid and that kind of thing. So the next one that I would talk about probably the most is medical, and there's a myriad of medical things that you can actually run across when you're out and about. When we were just traveling just about 2.5 hours away, we went over to a theme park a couple of weeks ago in Indiana, and my wife was out in the sun all day at a water park, and she got really badly sunburned. Actually had second-degree burns on her back. And I happened to have a medical bag that had a little bit higher level burn treatment ointment that is not just your standard aloe vera rub that you buy at Walmart. It was more of a medical grade stuff. And my bag, full disclosure, was My Medic. And it's a really, really good company that really thinks through a lot of the stuff. Prior military guys, prior Delta guys, I've actually met some of the high end guys at that company at a couple of places like SHOT Show and Goals, and they're really, really good, God-fearing people. In fact, we're looking to partner with them on some medical stuff here before too long with Righteous Savages, so keep an eye out for that stuff. But they make really awesome medical packs that are tiered up, so they have a personal all the way to like a full-on, hey, you're a medic, and this is a full-on backpack that you could treat dozens of people with. When it comes to that, you need everybody when they think of medical, there's two different schools of thought. They're thinking boo-boo kit and they're thinking trauma kit. There's two different sides there, and they actually cover that. In most of their kits have some form of trauma and some form of the boo-boo side. So they'll have band-aids, but they'll also have tourniquets. These are important things because typically your Walmart first aid kit is going to be basically a glorified boo-boo kit, not with a lot of things that you're going to need that could save your life. More like, oh, I'm cut, I don't want to get infected. Okay. But those are two different worlds. And what My Medic does is they really do a good job of combining them. There's other companies out there, so I'm not saying just to go to them, but in my experience, I have several of their med kits, and they always seem to be thinking through multiple layers of medical. You need to have some sort of training on this stuff. And I'm not talking about getting on YouTube for 4 hours watching medical. It's a completely different world when you actually start learning how to plug a wound, how to apply a bandage over a leg, how to put a tourniquet on a limb, because this is all important stuff that you guys need to understand. Because if your 10-year-old child is shot in the leg and is bleeding out, you need to know how to put a tourniquet on. And it's important that we think about those things. We learn how to stage equipment. We learn how to stage our tourniquets to where they're quickly accessible, because when they come in the package and you don't remove them from the package, they are not set up. The other thing is to think through what you're going to carry on you and what you're going to have in your vehicle. So I would always encourage that you have some sort of medical on you. And when you're on vacation, my wife, she carries those big bog bags and those kinds of things. When we're going to the beach, it's really easy to stick a small to medium size first aid kit in there, especially if it has a couple things like maybe some tourniquets, maybe even if you're out in the sun, maybe some fast acting caloric things that are going to help you with things like dehydration and things like that. So that's all stuff that's actually included in a lot of these really nice medical things. And I would not go to Amazon. It's going to be cheap Chinese stuff. I have bought a few Amazon med kits that were like $20 and supposedly had 1,000 items in them, and most of the items was garbage. Go to a reputable company. When it comes to tourniquets, North American Rescue, I wouldn't go to anyone else but them. North American Rescue, and don't buy a tourniquet off of Amazon. You'll find them for cheap, but they're not reliable. I've seen dozens of them with my own eyes. The windlass break, or the Velcro not hold, or multiple different issues with them. The other thing is get one that's a different color for training, and then have them on your bag that you have not used. Tourniquets are meant to be used, but they're not meant to be used over and over and over again. That's why, like, North American Rescue has 3 or 4 different colors. I think they have an orange one. I have several orange ones, and those are my training ones. They're very visible. You can see them. They're good. And then most of the ones that I have for real life are black, and I've never used them. But I know from experience with training law enforcement and talking to guys, special forces guys that have actually been shot, that they are consistent and their manufacturing is very, very high quality. So that's just a little tip for you guys on tourniquets and why you guys should use them. There are other tourniquets out there. I just say North American Rescue because I know them. The RATS tourniquet, you'll find them in some of these med packs. They're fine, and actually they can be good for people with smaller limbs like children, or even pets. And it can help you be able to get that on there very quickly. So that's all stuff to consider, and do your research. This is just generally informational stuff for you guys. Okay, I think that's what we need to cover for medical. Just like with defense, I would have something small that you can carry on you. If you have your wife or your husband, you can carry these things. So they make them small enough to where they could fit into a purse or a bag if you're going to the beach, and just figure out a way to stage them so that they are very, very close in proximity to you at all times. Then I would have a larger medical setup in your vehicle. That, remember, that is your safe haven. That is what you need. So now communication is the next thing that we're going to get to. And communication is very, very important, especially with a major kind of disaster or catastrophe, terrorist threat. Having the ability to communicate is a big, big deal. And there are some items out there that you guys can find. There's radios. The radio world is a big thing to get into, and it's a very layered thing. There's radios that you can communicate through satcoms, and then there's radios that you can communicate through repeaters over several miles. We're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of that, but we do have some things that are coming out soon on communications. We're doing a whole series on communications with radio, and I will be putting some of that information on the Survival Dispatch, as well as our YouTube channel, Righteous Savages. If you guys aren't signed up for that, go over and sign up for our channel. We have a lot of stuff coming out, multiple videos over the next several months. So give you guys a little bit of a heads up on that. But communication is important, and there are a few things that you guys can get that double in purpose. The InReach from Garmin is a big, really cool item. They can be a little expensive, but it's a land nav tool. So if you ended up having to be on foot, you could use the InReach to navigate home. You can have preset planned routes, and it also allows you to send messages via satcoms to other InReach devices. So it really kind of cuts out the middleman as far as relying on local towers in an emergency type situation. The other thing is to keep your physical copies of important contacts. You may not remember numbers. I mean, I can remember my childhood phone numbers very, very easily because I had to dial them. In fact, we had a rotary phone. Even when touch-tone phones were kind of like the thing in the 80s, we still had a couple of the old turnstile dial phones that you had to remember the number. And if you made one mistake or you didn't push it around far enough, you had to start the process all over again. So you really learn how to memorize numbers very well. So I could still tell you my parents' home phone number, my first number, because back then we didn't just, hey, give me your contact info, put it in our phone, and then we just look for a name. And that's something that technology has hurt us in the memory side of important phones. So I would get a small, like business card size piece of paper or cardstock, and I would write or type all of the important numbers and communications that you guys might need to remember. Put it in your wallet. Then you have it on you. And it's not going to go bad because it's laminated and you can go in there. You need to update it. I would set it up to update when you change the batteries in your red dots and your smoke detectors. Make sure that all of that information is still relevant and do that. This needs to become a regular practice. Alternative communications also include emergency radios, international SIM cards. They can be lifesavers when conventional networks fail. Do not plan to just rely on your cell phone. That is a recipe for disaster. If you guys have ever witnessed some sort of issue, then where basically communications were knocked out, you know that immediately you feel completely helpless. So some cell phones will remain in the emergency mode to where you can contact um, emergency services, but that's all you can do. That's usually a sat link type thing, but I would not rely on that. I would have alternative, tertiary, secondary types of communications, as well as those Garmin InReach. They're really nice, and I plan on getting even more of them. There's like the little watch nav things, the Trex, and then there's the InReach, which has a full color LCD screen, and you can send messages to people and do all of those kinds of things. There's a lot of things out there that can help you guys. So that's really communications: is have a plan, have backups, and be ready to go. Financial preparedness. This is a big one, and because if we'll get back to our conflicted question, but if the banking system goes down, you only have what you have to either trade or when it comes to cash. So I would say at least carry a several $100s with you in cash. It could be vital, up to $1,000, but I wouldn't keep it all in one place. Spread it out. Put it in your shoe. Put it in. Have your spouse carry some. You carry some, but don't keep a large amount of money all at one place. And I would have it separate from any kind of cash that you plan on spending on your vacation, but always have some sort of cash, various denominations, so that you don't have to say, oh, you need 20, I only have 100. Break that down into manageable chunks of 5s, 10s, 20s, 50s, and maybe 100. I would keep it in lower denominations of the amount that you're carrying, though. It's probably a better, no, it's definitely a better plan than carrying like 10 $100 bills, because then somebody's going to say, oh, it'll be $20. You give them 100, like, oh no, it's $100. See what I'm saying? So it's important that we understand those things, and maybe even store those different denominations in different places, different pockets, that kind of thing. But remember, this is all about planning. This is not something that you go on vacation and you decide to do. You have to do this days, weeks, maybe even months ahead of time in planning out what you're going to do. And, other options are to store some of it in your luggage. Although if you're flying, and we'll get to that later, the differences between traveling, the context of this is you're traveling in your main vehicle with your family. So we need to have digital and physical copies of important documents. So take pictures of your passports, take pictures of your insurance cards, your medical information, and make sure it's stored on something. Even if the networks are down, you can still use your phone to retrieve those items if you have pictures. And you can store them in like the secret folders in your pictures so that not just everybody can get access to them. And then they require a Face ID or a passcode to get to. But it's all important that we keep those things in mind just in case we were to lose our wallet, so that we have backups. And I would also suggest that if you're traveling with your spouse, that you each have pictures of each other's important documents just in case you lose one of the phones. These are all just little tidbits for you guys to understand. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I will be putting out an article this next week that's going to give you guys some suggestions for items that you might want to carry and specific ways of doing this. I think this is an important enough topic that I will put that out on Substack for you guys to see and review the things that we think are important for you. Now, I'm gonna circle back to something that I was talking about before, and that's your defensive plan. I can use an example. My 12-year-old son, I know I can trust him with a firearm. And so in a life or death type situation, I know I could give him a firearm and he could protect himself, he could protect me and his little brother and little sister and his mother. I know I could give my wife a firearm, and then we have 3 armed people if we're trying to defend something. But we need to know where our children are at. I started my son Logan in firearm training, teaching him gun safety. I let him shoot his first gun when he was 5 years old. He is now 13. So he's been 8 years of slowly, gradually working up with firearms. Now he can shoot 1,000 yards with a bolt gun. He can handle an AR. He can clear malfunctions. He's very proficient. In fact, I would say his proficiency, the only thing that holds him back is his physical strength because he's not a full-grown man. But he can manipulate weapons. He can do all of that stuff. He's a very good shooter. And I know that I can trust him there. So have these conversations with your kids and your wife on defensive plans. You guys need to all go out to the range and train. It's important. And that's a big part of this, as well as or emergency response, understanding roles. Say you're in a restaurant on vacation and an armed gunman comes in. You don't need to become part of the crazy crowd running around, but you need to know what your roles are. So I have these conversations with my son, and not with his younger brother or sister, but with my 12-year-old, 13-year-old son. I have these conversations with him of what's your role? And his role is to ensure that he gets out and his brother and sister gets out. Mom's role is to make sure that they all get out. My role is to protect and make sure that the entire family makes it to safety. If I have to carry one, I have to carry one. But that is all important conversations we have before we go on vacation. And so that people understand situational awareness. Teaching your family to stay off of these when we're in public. If you're at home or you're at your hotel room, your Airbnb, scroll Facebook, do whatever, post pictures, that kind of thing. I'm big on, I love to take photos and videos, but I do that sparingly as much as I can, and I am still always watching people. And honestly, because I do so much stuff with video and photography, I typically have a actual camera with me. It's a good opportunity to actually, if you see something suspicious, to video it or to take a picture of it. Because if they see somebody with a camera, a lot of times people aren't as apt to do these kinds of things. So, because generally criminals and terrorists don't want to be seen before they absolutely until the very last minute when they're about to attack or they're about to do whatever they're going to do. So, if you can see those things, the situational awareness is even broader than that. It becomes really that primary defense mechanism. That's the defense that happens before anything else. Seeing that, practice the Cooper color system to maintain appropriate alert levels. Train yourself to identify exits, defensive positions, and potential threats in any environment. So, understanding the threat level, what's going on. If you're in a larger city, then obviously your threat level is going to automatically be heightened. If you're in a rural area, then you're going to have to take that into consideration. So let's talk about a couple of different scenarios. I just went through this with my family at a theme park because we went to a theme park over in Indiana. Now it's in rural Indiana. It's it's really kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and the whole town is kind of built around this theme park, which is called Holiday World, and it's in Santa Claus, Indiana. Fitting, but it's really, it's about 35-40 minutes from the nearest big town, which is Evansville, Indiana. It's a very rural setting. But even there, in theme parks, you're not allowed to carry weapons in, and they do have metal detectors. So that's when you can find there are some options out there that will make it through metal detectors. And understanding whether they have a metal detector or a scanning system where they can actually physically see what's going on, like airlines have, is important too. There are some non-metallic tools that you guys can get that are shaped like knives that are very, very effective weapons and can work very well if you can't carry a gun into a theme park. But if you don't have any means of protecting yourself, you still have situational awareness. And that's what's important. At a theme park, when you're talking about having children with you in a water park, you can see some questionable behavior. Maybe there's some creepy people in there that just want to check out kids. And that's a real thing in today's world, unfortunately. But don't just be buried in your phone. Don't be just buried into just laying around and doing nothing. In all honesty, at the water park, I didn't really get in the water too much. I was watching my family. I sacrificed some of my enjoyment. Now, I'm not saying I didn't ride rides or any of that kind of stuff, but I prioritized paying attention to where my family was and what they were doing. And as leaders and men in our families, that's really our commission. So I kept an eye on my children. I kept an eye on my wife in a busy situation. And I sacrificed some of my own enjoyment that I might have rather have done for that. That's a part of this as well. Understanding that someone has to be paying attention to the situation and be willing to gather everyone up and get out whenever you see that. We had a good example of that. On the second day, we did 2 days in the water park and or in the theme park, and the second day, a really crazy storm came in all of a sudden in like 20 minutes, and we had to exfil out of the park very quickly. We ended up shutting down the park because it was just this massive thunderstorm. But when we saw the clouds rolling in, I mean, they came in fast, and so we saw it, and I immediately said, "We're going." And we gathered everything up and we got out of the park. Now, it still took us a good 20 minutes, and the rain had already come in by that time. But identifying those kinds of things, threats and other items, weather issues, is important when it comes to being prepared. So that's all a part of situational awareness. The other thing, and this is generally across the board, but we have to understand that there are aspects of this that go beyond a terrorist attack or civil unrest, natural disasters. What if there's a fire in the restaurant you're in that blocks an exit? You have to know all of the exits. I think one of the best things that I can give you guys as far as advice would be to run mental scripts. Don't just think through things, I'm sorry. Don't obviously always think through all of the possibilities. And I think that the people that watch Survival Dispatch, you guys, the guys that I know and love that are here on every stream, you guys understand this, but I want you guys to put it into practice. I want you guys to understand that it's not just something to entertain or some information together and then purge it out of your brain. It's a important thing for us to run these mental scripts, to run the different scenarios. What's going to happen if this happens? I do this every Sunday at church. We actually kind of change where we sit from week to week so that we're not sitting in the same spot. And it gives you a lot of different perspectives. If you're sitting up in the front, or if you're sitting in the back of the church, if you're sitting off to the left or the right. And we go to a rather large church of over 1,000 people. We have multiple services. And so seeing that stuff is important to understand. And I always try and sit someplace where I can see the vast majority of the crowd, of who is in the room. And I can also see if people enter that look suspicious. Several years ago, we had a couple of guys come in trench coats. Now, they ended up being nothing dangerous or threatening. They were known people, but I immediately pulled my wife and said, "Let's go. I'm going to go check this out. You go find the kids and be prepared for us to leave." And then I went to the head of our security team and I talked to him, and he said, "Yes, I know these guys. I know it's kind of a red flag, but I know these guys and such and such, such and such." So I went and got my wife. We left the kids in the kids' areas and we went back into the service. But had I not been paying attention to what was going on, and I know there's a fine line there, because I do believe in worshiping God in church too. But I think that, this is also something that's commissioned in the Bible, is to stand on the wall, to be watchmen. And that's really what I want you guys to be, because it can save lives, not just your families, but everybody. So that is all parts of situational awareness, all parts of what you guys need to understand for this exercise, this whole part of traveling. And now I'm going to spend a little bit of time, just a few minutes, because I think that this is a broader subject, but traveling in different scenarios. So let's spend the last few minutes talking about that. If you're traveling by air, there's a lot more restrictions. Obviously, you can't carry weapons on you with that, with the exception of some of these specialized things that have come out. But even then, you might get popped for that. I've had tactical pins taken away from me at airports. Really, only California, ironically. It made it through every other one. Those are great tools if you can get them through. But generally, if you're flying, you're not going to have the ability to carry a weapon with you. And so that's all stuff that you need to consider. Where you're traveling to, if you're flying, you can obviously travel with firearms. You just have to check them in with the flights, with the FFA, and you have to make sure that they are in a proper container. Another thing, make sure that they are unloaded. I had a issue with TSA that I had accidentally forgot when I was coming back from WAFT a couple of months ago. I had forgotten to unchamber around in my handgun, and TSA had to do an extra thing for it, and they actually sent me a letter saying that they were going to fine me $1,800 for doing that. Now, I did fight it, got that removed, but it was a big hassle. So make sure that you're following the rules, and I've flown with guns for over 20 years. And that was the first time I ever made a mistake. But double and triple check. If you're traveling with other people, have them check your firearms as well. It'll save you a lot of time and hassle and potentially money with that. So these are all things to consider. Who are you traveling with? Say you're not traveling with your family, you're traveling with a colleague, a work colleague, or a fellow firearms person like I do frequently with Dave and some of our other guys at Righteous Savages, understanding the situations and how you're going to split up those responsibilities. If I was traveling with, say, Dave Kemp, I know that he's going to be using situational awareness as well as myself. So I know he's got my back, I've got his. That's an important thing. But maybe you're traveling with somebody from work who's liberal and has no idea. Then you're kind of going to be on your own, and you may have to um, teach them in a very, very interesting way how to be situationally aware for you. Maybe you draw attention to things that stick out to you, but always be aware, especially with a job. You obviously don't want an HR type situation. So we have to be aware of the people we're traveling with. You may be forced with your work to travel with somebody like that. So you have to be careful. Maybe you say, hey, I'm going to check in over here, and you go check a firearm if you're flying with a firearm. But also know your work rules on that. If you've got somebody that's going to turn you in and you could potentially lose your job, understand those things. Now, traveling by vehicle with with someone who has the same mindset as you, that's super easy. I could travel in my truck with Dave and Luke, and we would have 6 or 7 firearms. We'd probably have multiple hundreds of rounds of ammunitions and loaded magazines, chest rigs, everything that we would need to get home safely. And that's just the way that we travel. I'm doing a really awesome video on how to set up your vehicle for day-to-day and travel that's going to be coming out soon. But for now, I think that just understanding the difference of situations and the like. Now, traveling with foreign countries, that's a big one. And I try to avoid that as much as I possibly can. But if you have to, you can register with the State Department's STEP program. Know the locations nearest to the nearest American embassy. I would print those out, have physical copies and digital copies. Remember, foreign countries, you're subject to their laws, not American protections. Research local customs and legal systems before arrival. In many places, activities that are routine in America can result in serious legal consequence abroad. That's important. Vehicle preparedness, that's crucial. And one thing that we didn't actually talk about was just general maintenance of your vehicle. Never let your vehicle, your gas tank, get less than half full on a regular basis. Put extra water in your car. Like, just go to Sam's Club or Costco and grab a case of water bottles. Put them in your car. Get a small cooler to put them in. But it's worth it. Or have a few gallons of water. That's going to be a big, big deal, because if you end up on foot and you need water, being able to have access to it in your vehicle is important. Don't leave it out in the sun. Obviously, you don't want it scorching hot, but keep it in a place where it will remain safe and that you can access it. Physical max when GPS fails, that's all important. One other thing with your family before I let you guys go. No matter where you're at, talk about a plan to meet if something bad happens. Say you had to go to the restroom and something clacks off while you're away from your family. Hey, guys, we're going to make our escapes as best we can, and we're going to meet back at the vehicle where we parked in the parking lot or in the parking lot next to us. And get that as a general rule. We're going to talk in the upcoming weeks about home preparedness, how we prepare for disasters at home. That's a much more easy topic. The hardest one is getting back home. But I think that really the way that you guys could put this in practice, especially if you're like me and you have small children, practice this when you go out to eat. Hey guys, we're done with our meal. Let's practice getting out in different ways to get used to maybe having to exit. Make it fun for your small kids. Make it a game so that they don't feel the pressure. But it's also that embedding that information into them subconsciously so that they know, hey, maybe make it like when my 4-year-old daughter would say, the monster's coming to get you. I'm the monster. You got to get away from me. Make her exit someplace else and go back to the van. You got to get to the van in order to be safe from the monster. Or, whatever you want to do. That's just a for instance. But this is all important stuff that you guys need to do with your families. As Christians, we are actually commissioned to be prepared for these things, to give these things to God, and to allow us to really focus in on those things that matter. But in the Bible, there are multiple examples, Nehemiah, Joseph, of preparedness and rebuilding and being prepared to defend the things that matter to you while going about your daily lives. And it's the old Nehemiah 17 of on the wall with a sword in one hand and a hammer in the other. Live your life, but be prepared to defend it at any time. And that's an important thing. Prayer and faith should accompany any kind of preparedness activity. Ask God to show you the things that may be blind spots to you guys. I know God has over my life revealed a lot of blind spots in my own life. And remember, we are to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. That's a biblical principle of vigilance and compassion for your fellow man. But be willing to escalate. Be willing to take on hostile to protect those that you love and other innocent people that may be bystanders. Quick reminder, I want to give you guys another heads up on going over and signing up for a free Substack that gets you the Saturday Watch Guide, which is that list of things throughout the week that we publish, thumbnails, links, and descriptions. That way you never miss an episode because you didn't get a notification. Remember, big tech loves to do that so that you guys don't know when we're on. That's why we are always on at the same time every night, so you know. Don't forget our sponsors for these episodes, CCW Safe for self-defense coverage. Go check them out. Carnivalt, use that Eat Meat code for 10% off. Amazing stuff. And if you are law enforcement or you know law enforcement, go over to Compliant Technologies and check out their police gloves. I've been zapped with those things. It's not fun. And I don't know very many people that would actually be able to fight back with those things on you. So as we close tonight, we have covered some critical information about the ever-changing threat landscape that every American patriot needs to understand. Every one of us. And you guys are important. That's why we're giving you this information. First action, establish reliable communication protocols. This is good for just general everyday. In disaster, my kids may be at school, my wife at work, and I'm at work. We're within several miles of each other, but we can't get communication with each other. We need to walk through that stuff. It's the first thing. Means of having emergency contacts, rally points, backup communications. Second, you guys need to start your travel emergency kits. That's first aid, defensive, and have lists that you guys can check off when you're getting ready to go. Distance from where you're going from home and how you would have to get back. The stuff that you would need to get back, keep that stuff in your vehicle. Don't rely on being able to pick up stuff at a store when you're on vacation. And this is all extremely important for you. I'd like to do a special shout out to Command 11, the submitting yesterday's best news. Scotland, it's best news story. Scotland, Europe is a ticking time bomb, and the political crowd doesn't want to or cannot diffuse it. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world with the Islamic world growing, and we're going to be back tomorrow with some information on that as well. Don't forget, if you guys have signed up for our Signal Chat via the Guardian paid membership, you guys will be able to get some of this information that we're getting from Command 11, Khalid Muhammad, and all of those, as we have made connections there. It's a huge, huge resource. Follow him on X, or follow them on X. It's a huge wealth of information. And all the information they're putting out, you can see that they're being suppressed in a lot of ways because of the engagement they're getting with as many follows as they have shows that they are being suppressed, much like Survival Dispatch is. And they've been ahead of the curve on most of this stuff. So don't forget to check out the information we're going to be putting out this week on emergency preparedness, the kits and builds that will help you guys, and recommended sources for information and gear that you guys can take advantage of. Now let's get back to the conflicted question. The banking system collapsed, and although you have some supplies, if you had access to your bank account, you could always get more. There are, however, people who owe you money, and it dawns on you that you need to collect now in cash or goods or risk never getting paid. How would you go about collecting debts after a collapse? This is a difficult question for me because I generally think that preparedness is something you plan for, and you don't need to be relying on other people. Now, if it's somebody that you know and somebody that you need to have a serious conversation with, yeah, by all means. I don't know that I would do anything of threatening violence or anything like that against somebody that I know, because it's just not going to be helpful. You may need those relationships with people that more than you need even, more things. The real key for me would be prepare beforehand. This has essentially been the theme of the entire night. Be prepared beforehand so that you don't have to make those decisions, so that you don't actually have to go shake somebody down for money that they owe you. But it's important. Now, the context of this is a banking system collapse. It doesn't necessarily say anything about, that there is this massive gridlock or anything like that. Now, that would be implied, but maybe you can say, hey, while they're fixing this, I need this and I need that. But this is all going to be dependent on who you're talking to. I'm not one that's going to just go and threaten somebody when they owed me a little bit of money. I may have a conversation with them and see if they would be willing to do that, and then kind of take it as it is. But the real message, I think, to this conflicted question is that you need to be prepared now rather than waiting, and make sure you're stashing some cash in your house so that you don't have to rely on the electronic banking system. But put your answers. I'm sure you guys have some great ones. Put them in the comments, and we'll check those out. And it's going to be, it would be really interesting to see what you guys say. Now, Chris is going to be back tomorrow evening with Jeff, Randy, JJ Carroll, and the topic will be determined today. We don't have all of the details on that, but they will be back with a great episode of JJ and Randy and Jeff. Chris put their heads together. It's always good information. Guys, thank you. And I can't stress enough how much SDN appreciates the support of our subscribers and sponsors. You're the reason that we put the work in to bring you this truth, this information. And we hope you guys enjoy it. Hit that like, subscribe, and share button on whatever platform you're watching us on. Don't forget to go over to Substack and sign up for that free account, and you'll get that information on a weekly basis. Until then, until tomorrow, I'm John Wheaton, and thank you guys for sticking around, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Until then, be prepared, get training, and God bless America.
What you believe has no bearing on reality. Fire burns whether you believe it or not. Poison kills whether you believe it or not. Hell is a real place whether you believe it or not. Every liar is going to answer for every lie. Hello, Congress, are you listening? Every rapist is going to give an account to God. Every gossip and every talebearer will answer for every word. You cannot destroy another person's life and reputation and expect God to give you his blessing. Every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. You will bow today or you will bow later, but sooner or later you are going to bow before Jesus Christ. And there's a payday someday.